All right, we're live. Danica, go ahead.
All right. Well, welcome to our panel. Our panel with the Hope Network is Family and Relationships panel. We just to let you know, we're also going to have a breakout session at the end. So if you want some one-on-one coaching, then Danielle will share with you how it is that you can access that to tap into some very, very effective coaching. Thank you so much something that occurred to me before we went on is the Hope Network. The Hope Network is an organization that has caused each one of these panels to be effective. And I asked one of our the founders, Nathan, is Hope Network a community of movements or a movement of communities? Something to think about. So just to give you an idea of who I am, I'm Danica Joan, and I'm the founder of Kids Need Both. And Kids Need Both is a family advocacy organization whose mission is to educate those who are impacted by high conflict families going through custody situations. And through the Hope Network, we've actually created our own community called Hope for Families. I forgot. To bring all of these professionals together to be of service to the individual families. So, and at today's panel, we have Danielle Demchuk, and she's going to be leading us into our into the one-on-one breakout sessions at the end. We have Adina Leibowitz and Lisa Goodpaster and Dr. Elizabeth Cohen. So I'm going to take just a few minutes for each one of you to share who you are and what got you into this field. Get about like 90 seconds or 2 minutes. Let's start with Danielle.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Danica. It's so great to be here with each one of you. And I'm so passionate about relationships and how we can have better relationships. I'm a relationship coach, and I have a background in positive psychology, but I got into this being in the health and wellness field for over 19 years. And I have been a nutrition coach and an exercise coach and yoga instructor. And then through all of this, I've always had a passion for relationships. And it wasn't until, honestly, the research shows that relationships, the quality of our relationships, creates our happiness and well-being. And I wanted to dive deeper and explore more. And so I went on to get my certification in positive psychology and have a coaching background already. And I really wanted to just go really deep with how can we have better relationships, because how we have our intimate relationships and our microcosm of relationships magnifies into our macro relationships as an earth and as a country and as other countries. So that is how I got started. So I think of relationships as a self-care practice. Just like we fuel our bodies with proper nutrition and proper exercise, we fuel daily our relationships. And knowing how to do that and being in the driver's seat of your relationships so that you know how to cultivate the relationships that you want in your life is what I love to do. So thank you.
I love it. Relationships are very important. Like one of our previous panels said, one of the panelists said, nobody ever committed suicide because they were hungry. But people who are lonely commit suicide every day. Okay, so our next one, Adina, why don't you share who you are and how you got into this field?
Yeah, thank you. I am very glad to be here today as well. My name is Adina Leibowitz, and I'm a family mediator and co-parenting educator here in Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota, so a little north of all the folks in Florida, here in flyover country. I completed my mediation training with Dan Simon, and he's an expert on transformative mediation, which is not your average kind of attorney-mediated mediation. But I'll say more about that throughout our discussion today. This method of mediation is for couples in conflict, and it can help people find less stress and more peace, which is my goal for helping families, and especially for the kids caught in that conflict. I myself am a divorced mom of 3 kids. All of my kids are grown now. At the time of my divorce years ago, I had a busy travel schedule for my job implementing software, and I completely understand when people find co-parenting challenging. My goal is to help families find less stress, less conflict, and more peace in their co-parenting.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. So, Dr. Elizabeth Cohen, share with us who you are.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on this panel. I'm really honored to be with such smart, wise women. So I'm a clinical psychologist. I live in New York City and work in New York City. I've been practicing clinical psychology for over 15 years. And I recently wrote a book called Light at the Other Side of Divorce, Discovering the New You. I became interested in helping people thrive and grow and heal through divorce because when I was getting divorced 10 years ago with a 6-month-old and a 2.5-year-old, I incessantly tried to Google divorce recovery programs and I couldn't find anything. And I realized that by not being able to find anything, I was sent the message that I wasn't going to heal. So for me, I never wanted another person to have to feel that hopelessness that I felt. I'm privileged to have a psychology background, so I pieced together one day at a time a program to heal, and using research supported strategies, putting 1 step forward, 2 steps back. And I've synthesized that into my book and into an online program, again, so people will have a comprehensive healing program so that this can be a part of their life, but not define their entire life. That you can step into the next chapter and have a beautiful experience of life, seeing divorce or separation as graduate school for relationships, understanding more about yourself so that you can know yourself better and have deeper, more connected relationships in the future.
I love it. I love it. Lisa, you're up.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm very honored to be here. And I am a childhood trauma educator, along with the founder of the Stephood Project, which is bringing awareness to the dangers of not co-parenting, as well as the silent epidemic of parental alienation. I am one of millions. I suffered throughout childhood, my entire life, 40 years. I lived a false narrative. And I'm the first, I guess, kid from divorce in the world to actually have evidence and bring to light what happened to me as a kid and through adulthood. And so my hope is that my purpose is to help as many as I can to be that bridge for families and kids that are suffering in silence. Because as we know, we grow up dependent on our parents. And my hope is that every kid from divorce, every person from divorce, if anything, I have a background in divorce because I grew up with 4 parents. So I understand a multitude of things that are really important. Most of all, I'm an inner childhood specialist, so I heal our inner children. We all carry those with us. So my hope is that that this kids need both. That this is one of the most important foundations to heal our world. We start with our families, and it is so precious and humble for me to come out and just say that what I survived, millions are still surviving. And I want them to know that you can heal. You can have an enjoyable, fulfilling life. And we start with at home. So that's what I'm here to do.
That is so awesome. You know, and the thing is because you experienced it at such a young age, there had to have been a lot of just pathogenic things that were programmed within you and around you. And there had to have been a certain point where you're like, something's wrong here.
right? My whole entire life, I walked around wondering what was wrong. Curiosity, probably it was, I had a lot of curiosity, and that curiosity never left. And yeah, I walked around, I called it all airspeed and no direction, trying to figure out what's going on. And, you know, I experienced most of what every human has gone through. And those are survivor patterns. And we'll talk about more of that later, but absolutely, yes. My whole entire, yeah, there's no shame in it. I was basically brainwashed and programmed, and I programmed that way out. But yeah, there's a way out and a way forward for every human being, especially our kids and our parents.
Well, I want to take each one of you and just spend a little bit of time just digging deep into what it is that you do, and just ask you a few questions here. We'll start with Adina. We'll start. Okay, so what part of failing to take self-responsibility leads to miscommunications in marriages and relationships?
Yeah, well, similar to Danielle, I'm also a health coach with my work with divorced families. Stress is a really big trigger for everyone, and so we're not going to be at our best in communicating in our relationships, our family relationships, our work relationships when we're under a lot of stress. And we all know that going through a high conflict divorce is extreme stress, a stress overwhelm, chronic stress. So what we really need to do is to be able to intentionally find moments of calm. Stress affects people in so many different ways. Some might be anxious or depressed. Some get very, very angry and don't have control of their rage. And some get very withdrawn. And we're seeing that actually with a lot of kids who are caught in their parents' conflict of divorce, that they simply don't have the tools to be able to deal with that kind of intense stress. And so they're self-harming at a very young age. We're seeing a lot of middle school kids experiencing that, and teens. So to be able to communicate better in relationships, we need to be at our best selves. We need to bring our best selves to our roles as co-parents. And that's what I help people be able to do. Every transition is an opportunity for conflict. So I help people kind of work through their parenting schedules to have less transitions, less conflict, the appropriate schedule for where they live in relationship to each other and where their kids' schools are, and how they work and what kinds of needs their kids have. So there's just less stress in the daily environment. And of course, when there's less stress, people can communicate better. I also really focus on very practical things like getting regular physical exercise, getting good sleep, and getting rid of the sugar and junk food from our lives. A lot of people will not be quite themselves when they're reacting to highs and lows of sugar in their bloodstream. And so not able to handle stress, not able to handle their communications and their relationships when they're responding to things like that. When we're healthier from the inside out, we're better able to handle stress. So especially knowing what your triggers are. I teach co-parenting classes for our local school districts in St. Paul and the East and South Metro here. And so we really focus on people knowing what their triggers are. If it's, you know, the other person's always late for drop-offs and pickups. If that's something that really triggers you, then you want to make sure that you allow more time in your schedule. When you can't control what's happening at the other house, having really clear boundaries of what is shared business and what is the other person's business about how they handle their household. So if it really upsets you that the kids don't go to bed on time and miss class the next day, it's not so appropriate to be communicating those things because that's within the other parent's household. But if it is impacting the schoolwork, then that's something that you can share with a teacher or a counselor through the school. And then one that gets a lot of us is when the other parent doesn't share information. So there are lots of ways that we can help communicate to anyone who's interacting with divorced families. It's so important to communicate directly with both parents. Information is power, and if one person controls that information, it can make things very stressful for the other. So all of our schools and our medical providers and our therapists and our youth directors and our sports coaches, anyone who's interacting with divorced families, I really ask you to share information directly with both families. That will help communication and relationships so much.
So as a mediator, how is it? Obviously, you don't get just wonderful, amicable people that just choose not to be in relationship anymore. I'm sure you how do you navigate creating communication, creating a listening of both parents for each other when they're angry at each other?
That's the really wonderful thing about Dan Simon's approach to transformative mediation. It is all about shifts and recognition and empowerment. Everyone wants to feel heard. That is so important to us as human beings. And it's one of the things that's so frustrating in divorce proceedings is that people don't feel like they've been heard, and especially by the other parent, but also by the courts. And so in transformative mediation, we create a very safe space for people to express what's deep in their hearts, to really listen to what the other side is saying, and to be open to considering options with a focus on what's best for the child. So when we create that safe space that people can hear each other, we use something that's very much like coaching, reflecting back what's said. We intervene in the session in a very gentle kind of way. But as somebody is expressing something, the mediator repeats it in the same kind of tone and emotion. And so if even a voice is triggering for the other person, when they hear the mediator repeat back exactly the same words, sometimes they're more open to hearing that than they are directly from their partner who they're really mad at. We create that space. We allow people to express themselves. We help them to be heard. We don't change their words. We don't change what they're saying. We just give them the space to be heard. And then we help them focus on the common goals. So we know that the reason people are in so much conflict is they have kids who they both love and care about. And that's what's so wonderful about Danica's program, Kids Need Both, is really that is at the core, the essence of everything we're talking about. They both deeply love and care about these children, but it doesn't come out that way. It comes out in all these conflict and all this anger and all this pain. And in the transformative mediation, we can shift that to really focusing on, you do have that in common. You do have that shared goal of raising whole, healthy children, and then helping the parents move forward from there.
Definitely, definitely. So let's see, in terms of having, in terms of the world having healthy families and relationships, what do you see as possible in the future?
I am definitely focusing on helping families find less stress and more peace. So I do that through the co-parenting classes. I do that through, and those are all through Zoom right now, have been for the past year. So anyone can join, even if they're not in Minnesota in our school districts. Individual coaching for people that need additional support. I facilitate support groups with Dr. Mark Grossman in Florida. So we have those all across the country, and then the family mediation as well. So I try to give people the skills to handle day-to-day issues, the necessary communication and conflict resolution skills. If they're facing a bigger issue, such as rearranging a parenting schedule due to a move or a job change, if they need help finding a care provider to address a health challenge or help a child struggling in school, for those bigger types of issues and decisions, I offer mediation, a safe space where the parties are empowered to express what's deep in their hearts and really listen to what the other side is saying. And I really hope people will include language in their decree that says they'll revisit their parenting schedules every 3 to 5 years as circumstances change, people move, jobs change, people get into new relationships, and their kids mature, so the schedule they agreed upon years ago may need some updating. The best way to transition to shared parenting after divorce is to have been sharing parenting and housework all along, from the day the kids are born, so we establish a new cultural norm that both parents are involved in caring for their children, and then the courts have no problem dividing time equally. When the parents split up, the most important thing is that they shift their relationship from an intimate romantic one to a more business-like relationship with the common goal of raising whole, healthy children into adulthood.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And in the interest of time, I'm going to shift and ask questions to the next person. Let's see. How about Dr. Elizabeth? I'm going to ask you about the same questions. What part of failing to take responsibility leads to miscommunications in marriages and relationships? And how can people begin to take responsibility for themselves?
I think it's a great question, and gets right at the heart of what I think a lot of people struggle with in life, which is that we are an externalizing world. We are people who look for a reason that something is making us feel a certain way. And the truth is, the painful truth, Adina mentioned this when she was talking about the different households. The only person we can control is ourselves. And so truly, truly, if we want to move forward or change or improve our relationship, our work, our life, we have to look at ourselves because we're the only ones we can change. And by taking responsibility, it means that we believe that something else is possible. It's actually a gift to ourselves and to everyone that we're with. I tell the story in my book about when I divorced someone who struggled with the disease of alcoholism. I was sitting in the playground one day with a bunch of parents, and people were asking me, oh, we hadn't seen the kid's biological dad. Where is he? What's the deal? And I went into a whole story. And because of his disease, I had lots of, very graphic stories to tell. And I told them, and people were very empathic. And I left the playground pushing the stroller. And I thought to myself, I feel terrible. That was a terrible experience for me. Sure, I have all these war stories, but it was at that moment, I was literally in Central Park where there was a path that I could choose one way. And I thought, I have a choice now. I could either continue to tell these stories for the rest of my life, or I could figure out compassionately, lovingly, and understandably, how did I end up here? And how do I make sure I don't end up here again? And that was a real moment of choice for me, where I took responsibility and tried to understand what was going on and how I ended up there so that I wouldn't make that mistake again. So I think it's the most powerful thing you can do, as Adina talked about too, which is compassionately and lovingly figure out what's going on for me, what's triggering me, what do I need, and what am I not getting? So many of us respond intensely to another person when we are not getting our needs met. So trying to identify, what am I not getting, and how can I either ask for that in an appropriate boundaried way, or even get it and give it to myself. And so I think that's a really important piece of taking responsibility.
I like it. I really, when it all starts with you can't fix other people, and it does no good to make them wrong.
No.
At all.
No. It's a way of being on the hamster wheel that you keep, because when you say you, they say you, right? I'm sure people know this who are doing mediation, right? It continues the blame game. And I talk also in my book and in my work about, you have righteous anger. There's a reason to be angry. I'm not saying what you're saying you did wasn't right. Didn't actually happen. It did happen. It's not effective. It doesn't move you forward. It certainly doesn't help your family by staying with it and harping on it. And we all know those people who you meet at a party who've been divorced for 30 years and are still telling you what their ex did. Right? It's like, who's that Buddhist phrase of holding hot coal, like throwing hot coals at someone when you're angry, like only you get burned. And so I think if you don't take responsibility and figure out how you got here and what you need, you're hurting yourself and not the other person.
That's right. I agree. Absolutely. Something to consider is that there are two kinds of conversations. There's conversations where you're assessing and judging. You're like in a basketball game, you're the spectators that are assessing, having no impact on the game at all, but you sure have a lot of opinions.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are the ones that are on the court. They're speaking in the now. How are we going to move the ball forward?
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. So I know I'm getting the word to make sure that we squeeze it, make sure everybody is heard. So I am going to go to, let's go to Lisa. Lisa, how can someone feel heard and then received, even if it feels impossible with their current spouse?
So, how can somebody feel heard and then ignored?
So for instance, maybe you're going through, I mean, you've gotten to the point where you're just really toxic for each other. You think the worst of this person. This person has said the horriblest, meanest things to you.
Mhm.
So how can someone feel heard and received, even if when it feels impossible?
So, I like to use the term the body and mind connection. And when we start to educate our kids and parents on how actually the body and mind work. So when people are in conflict, they're in their fight or flight. And when you're in your fight or flight, you cannot reason. Everything you're doing is out of survival. So when marriages, when couples understand this, they know that it's just like trying to negotiate with a bear that's going to attack you. It's not going to work. So my best answer, and I've lived this, I know this, nothing good can be done until we bring our nervous systems down, until we understand that once we feel safe, then both of us, both couple can be heard. Every one of us has to feel safe. And when you come from a family or a lot of trauma, our brains get rewired differently. So it takes time and patience and love. The thing about being heard is so crucial. And we can actually even do that for ourselves. The best thing though is if somebody witnesses that. So in my experience, being heard, like that was me. I was never heard and always rejected. I mean, always. And when I finally was heard and when I finally learned the tools and the psychology and the neuroscience, I wanted the whole world to know. I wanted every kid that was suffering in silence to know, why aren't they teaching this in school? So when we understand how our bodies and brains must work together, and that's when we are in the present and we are in the now. And when we get there, there's no other place you want to be. So yeah, it's all about just calming our nervous system, because our emotions hold on to feelings, and physical pain and emotional pain is the same pain. Meaning, wait, I broke my leg and that hurts more than what's been, in my what they're telling me in my brain hurts too. So that's how the mind and body are. We're always protecting ourselves, even from feelings. So when we understand this as human beings, it's a lot easier, it's more compassionate, and there's no judgment.
So what I hear is, really, if you're really present to, are you in survival? Are you in an emotional state?
Right.
Of survival, or are you really intentionally thinking more analytically, I guess?
Right.
So and of course, with that comes taking self-responsibility for your emotions and
Right.
your circumstances.
Right. Because no matter what happens to us as children, no matter what happens to us through life, no one is going to show up and fix us but ourselves. And when you're, in a high stressful situation, well, it's even hard to take that. Like, well, how do you do that? There's tools and there's ways to go about that. So yes, everyone should understand the physiological side, that, what goes into the mind also goes into the body.
So in terms of the world having a healthy families and relationships, what do you see as possible in the future?
Well, I hope that every family that's in divorce, that's going through divorce, high conflict divorce, that I hope that there's education. And once we start educating our families on why your children need you, it's not, it's why your children need you, how we have to protect our children as co-parents, and doing it from a place of love and understanding, not bitterness and rage. I also think that our judges in our family courts need some discretion and a lot more education, because fixing our families is also addressing what's going on in our family courts. So I like to say that we are we are in a shift right now. We are in a global shift, and everybody has been kind of, stuck with their families. And my hope is that my story, along with everyone else that stands up and shares their story, that there's a movement and that there's change, because without this is the most important thing. It starts with our families. We don't get that right. We can't, we have, this is up to every one of us, and our kids matter. Our kids are depending on us. So I would like to see even this type of mind and body connection, neuroplasticity in the schools. If the parents don't want to, if they can't co-parent, then we need to teach our kids about their nervous system and how to process emotions, because throughout life we're going to have them. They're normal. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just when they're disproportionate, like I didn't know. Nobody knew what was happening. So my hope is that, that there is, that everybody wants to go to healing, just like we go to the movies. I'm just going to healing next week. I just want everybody to know that you're okay. You made it. There's nothing wrong with you. Not one thing. We just grew up in a state of fear. And once you address that, because people can't heal until they know what happened to them. So talking about these things, childhood trauma and the divorce, and if you don't address those, they stay with you all through adulthood until they affect our bodies. And when we suppress emotions, they get stored in the body. That's why we have so many autoimmune diseases, inflammation. That's why anger, anger is not good. Anger, we can't get rid of it. It saves our lives. So does anxiety. These are just basic human fundamentals that just really weren't explained to most of us.
I gotcha. I know I want to talk to Danielle a little bit more about that, because you are not only a coach, but you do deal with a lot of the health aspect of healing. So let's ask, what part of failing to take responsibility leads to miscommunications in marriages and relationships? And how can people begin to take responsibility for themselves?
Okay, so
Danielle.
Okay, let me turn.
Thank you for the question, Danica. So I want to first start with a quote by Harville and Helen Hendricks. They're psychologists in relationships, and they say that talking is the most dangerous thing we do, and that listening is the most infrequent thing that we do. So I just start out with that because often we fight about difference and our objection to difference, and that creates anxiety. And when we have anxiety, we start to feel threat, right? And we have that fight or flight response set in. So this is just only leading me to say that in communication and in our relationships, and I'll just speak to relationships, whether divorce, in a relationship, relationships in general, because a lot of these tools apply no matter what, is to be able to take our temperature on when we're getting triggered. So is our heart starting to race? Is our palms starting to sweat? Is our armpits starting to sweat? And to know, the green zone is our nice, stable zone where we feel really good, we're grounded, we feel alive in our green zone. It's our happy place to be. And then we move into a little bit of a stretch, which would be our yellow zone. We're a little triggered, but not to the point where our frontal cortex shuts down, right? Our critical thinking part of our brain. And then the red zone, we've actually flipped, that we've gone to the point that there is no critical thinking. Our amygdala has kicked in. We're fight or flight all the way, right? So I really think it's our responsibility to start to gauge where we are in a conversation. So when I'm going to speak for me today, but when I'm in conversations, I can tell when my heart starts to race and I start to feel triggered by something somebody said. At that point, we know from the research that we can step away. We have choice at this point. We can take a deep breath. We can maybe say, you know what? this is really important. I just need to step away for a second, gain some composure, and can I give you a call later and we can come back to this conversation. This is the point when we have choice. And when our amygdala isn't hijacked and we're in that yellow zone, but we're a little triggered, again, this is where we have possibility of choice. And when we've hit that red zone and now we're in a threat state, we just want to move away from the pain and towards pleasure. So we start to move away from that. So our best communication really takes place in that green zone where we can have really important conversations and critical conversations. And in the work that I do with clients, we get into safe conversations. So there's a structure and it creates that safety, and they're able to stay in that green zone. And when they do get challenged, the structure, the STEM sentences, as in Safe Conversations with Harville Hendricks and Helen, it really helps our brain to remain safe. And so that we can have some difficult conversations. So I only say that is part of our responsibility, is to gauge whether we're in the red, the yellow, or the green zone, and at that point, what to do in each of those zones.
Yeah, I totally get you. Yeah, once you've taken that leap out of the green zone, sometimes there's just like no reeling you back in for a while.
Yeah, so it really requires like a lot of self-compassion, which in the breakout, we'll do some self-compassion exercises. We'll do some de-escalating exercises that you can have at your fingertips. So if you'd like to jump into the breakout, that's where we'll be testing out some of these self-care tools and self-compassion tools to help how to bring our nervous system, as Lisa was mentioning, how to bring our nervous systems back towards the green zone so that we can ground again and have our frontal cortex back online and have our whole brain starting to integrate again.
Very good. Yeah, we're looking forward to it. So just give you a heads up. After this panel discussion, we're going to be opening up a breakout room for you to get personal one-on-one coaching from Danielle. I'm very excited about it. One thing I wanted to do, I'm trying to be responsible with our time and everything, is I want to give each one of you an opportunity to say what you didn't get to say about who you are and who you are in service to your community. And let's start with Adina.
Yeah, well, thanks again for having me and letting us connect all across the country on this Sunday afternoon. I am really focusing on helping divorced or separated parents shift their relationship to a more business-like relationship, with their business being raising helping divorced or separated families shift their relationship from the intimate romantic one to a more business-like relationship, with the common goal of raising whole, healthy, happy kids. And so that both parents can be there for everyday activities and for very special milestones in their lives. And it comes down to really simple things about communication and conflict resolution. Having a shared calendar helps immensely with the communication. You don't have to rely on the other parent to provide that information. It's right there for everybody to see and everybody to know what the kids are doing, where they're going to be, if you have to run in 3 different directions. And then being at your best and being present for your kids. I know that's super challenging right now, as we've had a really challenging time this past year. Everything that we thought was normal and ordinary went by the wayside. So we're all really, really stressed out, but being able to cope with that stress in so many ways, like Lisa and Danielle and Dr. Elizabeth were saying about calming ourselves to be able to deal with that stress, and absolutely taking care of yourself by eating right, getting fresh air and exercise, having time with friends who you can really, really connect with. So you can even practice those sessions of, you really, really want to be heard. You can do that through journaling. You can do that through connecting with a friend before you actually have to have that difficult conversation with your child's other parent. Getting good sleep is so important to how we manage stress, and just being the best parent you can be. That will really, really help diminish the conflict and let our kids live in peace to reach their fullest potential.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And just so you know, each one of these ladies all have a website and a web presence that you can reach out to for their help. Okay, so Dr. Elizabeth, share with us something that came to you that you didn't get to share the first time.
Well, I think it's really important that people understand when you're going through co-parenting that it's essential to, as my first question was asked about responsibility, really always think about what is going on for me and what is going on for my kid. As both, Danielle, Lisa talked about, the amygdala gets overrun by the stress hormone, and we become really emotional especially when we're co-parenting and our kid comes home from the other parent's house and says something went wrong. And in that moment is the moment of pause. It is, as Tara Brach says, a sacred pause where you need to ask yourself, what is going on for me and what is going on for the kid? And really doing the brain work of separating out what was then and what is now. I tell this story in my book too about when my son was about 8, his father was expecting a child with his wife. And I would ask them and they would tell you very unskillfully, very often as a therapist, how they're feeling about this, what their thoughts are about having a new baby. And this baby was going to be living with their father, where they live primarily with me. And I don't know, after maybe the 400th time I asked, my son turned to me and said, "Mom, I'm okay with this. Are you?" And it was from the mouths of babes. At that moment, I thought, oh my God, he's right. This is all about my stuff. This is all about the fact that my partner wasn't there when I was young, when the kids were younger. He was now having this baby and he was sober, and it was all of my grief. It wasn't my kids' grief. And thankfully he helped me, and he was my best teacher. And I then did the work on my own grief and my own loss, instead of doing what I wanted to do was, oh, maybe the kids shouldn't see you that weekend when the baby's born, do all this maneuvering of the kids' schedule or stuff with the kids and their dad, as opposed to just owning my stuff. And I feel like I was on this precipice of making all these moves that, of course, on the surface, I'm sure Adina sees this a lot, would look like it made sense. Look, oh, there's a new baby, so we need to do this. But it was really all coming from me. And so I really want people who are listening and who are going through co-parenting to know that having a coach or having a therapist or having a really great journal or a book that you can read to help you figure out what are you feeling, so that you don't put it onto your kid and then act in a way that doesn't really serve them, that just serves you. So that's something that I want to share. And I also want to share that the reason I'm so dedicated to breaking the stigma of divorce and helping people see that you can heal is because I believe when we heal from trauma, we have the potential to change this world. And so if you commit to changing and healing your trauma, it's going to be amazing what comes.
I love that. I love it that your son gave you divine wisdom and said, "Are you okay?" It really resonates. It brings me to tears. That our kids can be our teachers.
Yes.
Love
if
it.
we listen, right? It's our job to listen.
Mhm.
And as Danielle said, that the listening piece. And we also have to listen to our children and hear what they're saying and take our stuff out of it. Thanks for giving me a chance to say that.
Yeah. Like, a lot of times our children don't want us to hurt. They don't want us to be lonely when their other parent has remarried. And a lot of times they'll say things to make us feel good. And we've got to realize, we need to do some self-healing to make sure that we're being a light to our children. Okay, so Lisa, tell us what you didn't get to say the first time.
Hi, thank you. I want to say that, for anyone that is watching, whether they're divorced, their former adult children from divorce, when we don't tend to those unhealed parts of our soul, they creep up on us, and there's no judgment. Those are when we start arguing or having issues with our loved ones and what happens to our bodies and mind. I would say start with awareness. and ask yourself, what's going on for me? What's going on the inside? And when you were taught that, it's very awkward at first, but it's the most awakening and beautiful experience, because when we are living in survival mode, we develop patterns, and these patterns are like behavioral patterns, and they take root. The issue with this is when we are living in a pattern state, we are not living our authentic selves. And that's where we want to be, is our authentic selves in the present, in the now. And no matter what has gone on in your life, I'm living proof. You can heal, rewire those pathways, and thrive. And it was my own son. I have one son, and his name's Matt. I named him different dog. I say that, I'll smile on my face. He taught me so much of unconditional love. And it was such a gift to be a mom. And I want every parent and every child to know that feeling. So when you have that foundation, you are powerful. And if you don't have it, you can recreate it for yourself. And that's the most important message. That you have the power, we have the power and the tools to teach you. And also, yeah, thank you.
You know, what I guess is I'm really present to with you is, you know, you went through the toxic conflict of your parents, and I would assert that both parents very much loved you, and they had their own different views of how they could turn you into your best self, but unfortunately it meant, you know, one felt like that they needed the other one to be marginalized or out
Right.
of the picture to do that.
Right.
And if that's something that each of us can discover for ourselves, that, you know, there's a certain aspect of our parents, even the worst parents, that they really do love you. They
Right.
just don't have the tools.
They learn from their own environment. And then when those aren't attended to, we pass them on generationally. Or you have or we break those generational cycles. And I hope that I know that there's millions of us trying to do that, needing the tools, wanting to know, how do you do that? And because that's not something that you can like really teach. So yes, absolutely. Yes, our parents need to heal so that they can be present, authentic, their whole selves, so that they can raise wholehearted, loving humans.
Yeah, when I discovered, I stopped making my mom wrong when I realized it was a 23-year-old that raised me.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
You know?
Yes. I had a stepmom. My stepmom was the one that did a lot of it. It's all the parents. No one is.
Yeah.
There's a saying. Everyone's to blame, but no one is guilty.
That's right. Well, I am going to give Danielle the last few minutes of our time, because I want you to be able to share what you weren't able to say about, you know, what you do in the world and who you serve, but also I want you to talk about our breakout session that's coming up after this.
Thank you for doing such a great job hosting, Danica, and being the panel leader today. So I work with women over 40 who are wanting to be fulfilled in their relationships, whether they're in a relationship or they're single. That is who I work with. And the one thing I wanted to add in any relationship is I wanted to bring the ratio of the 3 to 5 to 1 negative. So every 3 to 5 positive experiences, we want to boost the positive, not from an artificial standpoint, but from a wholehearted, honest standpoint. We want to acknowledge the positive in our relationships. Again, any relationship, as long as it's safe. Let's say that, a safe relationship, not abusive, but to build the positive. So that 3 to 5 ratio of every, and I like how Dr. Rick Hansen says it, who's a neuroscientist and a psychologist. He says that the negative is like Velcro. It sticks to us. but the positive is like Teflon, like it's repelled from us. So we have to constantly be boosting the positive, and don't worry, the negative will always be there, but we want to continuously boost the positive so that we have a nice solid base of positive experiences with this other person. And the other aspect that I wanted to touch upon is that we want to be able to, as adults and with self-responsibility that we were talking about earlier, is to be able to increase our tolerance level for discomfort. We want to start to expand some of that. And the way that we get to that is by slowing down again our nervous systems so that we can start to increase that tolerance a little bit and stay present in those those difficult conversations. Again, staying out of that red zone and creating more of letting that uncomfortable place not necessarily take us right to the red zone, but have the uncomfortable be more comfortable. So when we start to, which we will do, and Danica, you'd asked me in the breakout room, is we're going to play with how we can increase and some tools to increase our tolerance window and also deregulate our nervous systems so that we can start to really play with some of these tools. And like Lisa said, that are available to us, right? That there are ways that we know the science, they're there. So it's just being exposed to them and being able to use them and have them in your back pocket so that you can really take advantage of the stuff that works, so that you can have better relationships. And I say no matter how bad, I didn't come from a functional family, so no matter how bad it can be, we can still use these tools that work and really allow us to be more present with ourselves, allow our nervous systems to regulate, start to create more secure functioning in ourselves, have a core sense of who we are and who we want to be. And that was the other aspect, is we get to choose who we show up to be in any situation. We get to choose that. And the only place we can choose that is when we aren't hijacked. And we have that place of the green zone and the yellow zone where we know that choice is possible at any moment. And who do I want to show up to be in this situation? And what do I get to be? And I can move from being reactive to responsive. I can move towards being more responsive. And being a highly reactive person in my past, I know it works instead of my clients. So I just state, as Lisa said as well, the possibility.
Wonderful. Well, Adina Leibowitz, Lisa Goodpaster, Dr. Elizabeth Cohen, and Danielle Demchak. I want to thank you so much for being part of our panel this hour of speaking to hope for families and relationships. I know that there are people out there that really needed to hear what you had to offer. And I thank you for being part of this. And there is Nathan.
So everyone knows I put the Zoom breakout line in the chat, and then it's also in the social feeds. Eli's opening up the room right now, so if you guys want to go over there, and I want to just thank you, because this stand for workability in families and relationships, it's really literally what makes the whole world work. We only know ourselves in relationships. What we're creating with the recovery conversation, what we create with the men and women, it's so connected to the family relationship because we're passing this on generation to generation. So I know it seems like, what we did here was small, but change only happens at the grassroots level. Change is not institutional. Change is because a couple of small, and it surprised me, the majority of the people in this country before the revolution wanted to stay a part of the British Empire. The people who stood that this country would be free was a very small minority. So it's always going to be a small group of people that are standing for something that's outside of what's normal that are going to make the change. And I get each and every one of you is out in that way. So I want to thank you for that. And this is a really important conversation for me.
And one thing I wanted to add is the family is the core of society. If we heal, the grassroots are the family relationships. So we get to say how society goes. All right. And I guess that's it.
That's
It's
it.
been a wonderful, I love it. Thank you. Thank you, Nathan, for inviting us to the Hope Network. And we still haven't answered, is the Hope Network a community of movements or a movement of communities?
I like a movement of communities because
Yeah.
it really is community that creates it. But community is plural. Like you have your church communities, you have your family advocacy communities, but collectively, all the communities make one global community, which is singular because we're all connected and we share this earth. And there's not Muslims and Jews over here, there's not men and women over there. We're all just people. But technically, we've gathered in very specific groups to accomplish very specific aims and goals. But I just want to say thank you for getting me present to that because that's a cool distinction.
Yes. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us. And hopefully you will join us in the breakout room.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.